Hey everybody, welcome back to Battle Ready Inc., the channel all about bringing you as much nerdy content as possible. Today for you, we're bringing out another dragon review video I promised earlier in the week, and this is going to be covering the Wonder Dragon, one of the main monsters used in PvP. I'm also trying out a new microphone that I got, so I would really appreciate some feedback, no pun intended, in the comments section. If you like this compared to my old mic that I used in other videos, should I keep using this one or should I switch back to the old one? Personally, I think this one sounds a little more clear. It's just my voice isn't quite as deep as it is on the other mic. So it might be just more of a personal preference. I'm not really sure. So just let me know what you think. Also, if you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe so you can see further content like this. Always trying to put out newer and better content. Try to put out a Dragon Village M video at least once a week. This week going for 2, and maybe even a third, just depending on how things go. So we'll see what happens there. Also, you can support me on Patreon. I'll put a link in the description below. Get featured in future videos and also have input on future videos and what I create. So, pretty cool stuff there. But without further ado, let's get into this review. Alright, so I've got the Water Wonder Dragon pulled up here. And some of you that have done PvP may have seen this guy before. He is very commonly used, and we'll get into why he's so common and what makes him so good here. All right, so his basics here. We are covering the water type mainly. I will just kind of mention the other ones. He is an attack type as well. I think in my earlier videos I mentioned that he was maybe a tank. I think I might have said I put Solidarity runes on him. That was definitely a mistake on my part. That's just how I play him, is he kind of works as my tank, and I'll show you why. And so yeah, he is typically a Nat 4, and the reason I started powering him up is because he is a material needed for the Dark Darknix Dragon. And if you've seen any of my other videos or my content that I put out, I really like the look of the Dark Darknix Dragon. I think he looks super cool. So that's why I started leveling this guy, and then I realized, wow, he's kind of good, just because of his one of his passives. One of his passives is super really good. Sorry if I went overboard on that, but it's really awesome. So then I just kind of leveled him up, and I threw some runes on him, and I even turned mine into a 6-star. So because I'm using him in PvP now. But let's get into to his abilities here. So his leadership is all ally critical damage up by 28%. Pretty solid stuff there. If you have good crit rate runes, then I would definitely run this guy as your leader, so that way you can do some really heavy crits. I typically run the Light Darknix as my leader, just because he gives the crit rate up. So then, I mean, even my healers and my tanks have a chance of critting at that point with such a big crit rate buff. Especially because I use the crit rate up tamer as well, so my guys almost always crit, even the ones that don't have crit rate runes. So, but crit damage, if you have a good team built that doesn't need a even bigger crit rate buff, then this is a good fallback point. All right, his skill here that you attack with. So 20-second cooldown here, 3 targets, so it's an AOE here. And so it's a vertical attack, so up and down, and it comes up from the bottom, and so those are the targets it hits first. And what it does is inflict damage by tearing into space with overwhelming power. Power is increased proportional to your critical damage. So going back to his leadership skill there, giving yourself a crit damage boost is what makes this guy even stronger. So that should definitely tell you where your runes are going to be going. Mainly is going to be on crit damage runes. So, but you got to find that balance, right? Because you want critical damage, right? That's going to make his attack stronger. But you also want to still be able to get those crits off. So a little bit of crit rate sprinkled in there, and a nice balance. So if you're using a critical rate leadership skill and the critical rate tamer, then you can have a little bit more critical damage runes. So Alright, and his passive here, this is what makes this guy so good. This is why everyone uses him in PvP. When your HP reaches 0, it becomes a zombie for 40 seconds, and critical rate is greatly increased. Dies when duration is over. So 40 seconds, and then if you power him up all the way to 5, you get an additional 20 seconds. So a full minute in PvP. I mean, typically your matches don't go over a minute and a half, and if they go over a minute, then you know it's a pretty good matchup, to say the least. But typically you want your matches to last less than a minute. You just want to go all out, hit them with everything you got, and burn them down before that minute is up. So what a lot of people are doing is they do the T formation, where it's just a single dragon out front, and then you have another one, and then a row of 3 behind those 2 that are like, so it's kind of like, looks like that, right? And they put this guy out front, and he just takes all the hits. So I was saying solidarity on him before, because in my head I was thinking he's the guy out front. But no, so you just stack up all your damage runes on this guy, and so they just flatten him instantly, right? So he goes all the way to 0 HP, and then becomes his zombie form. And while he's in a zombie form, for 40 seconds to a minute, he cannot be killed. He just sits there and takes all those hits for free, and it doesn't hurt him at all. There are ways to get around it, but I would say 9 times out of 10, your opponent will not have that way of getting around it. Because you can, if your opponent's running dragons that can pull off buffs, then he'll lose his zombie buff, and then he'll just die. But mostly, I've barely run into that instance. So yeah, zombie is one of the craziest, most powerful skills that you can have in PvP. And I'll cover that more in the video that I'm going to release next, which is going to be covering PvP. So should be pretty cool there. But moving on to his next passive here, when HP is below 10%, inflict damage to random enemies within a short interval. So every 2 seconds, he's doing damage to a random enemy. Final damage is doubled on critical hits. So that's what I'm saying. You want this guy out front. You want him just to take all those hits right off the, right out the gate there. Get him into his zombie state, so his HP is below 10%, and then every 2 seconds, 3 random enemies, because target count of 3, are gonna get hit with damage. So, I mean, you're really, and then of course you can power up the skill to do more damage. But every 2 seconds, 3 enemies get hit with this guy's passive. So you want to get him very low, very fast, so that way he can start doing work, right? You don't want him to be in the back as a DPS typically would be, and then his skill goes off at the end of the game, right? When all your other dragons are dead and he's just now starting to do damage. So you want to have that happen as soon as possible, as early as possible in the fight. So great passive there, in addition to the zombie one. And then lastly here says, so his drag skill, his final form of it, is when your HP is below 10%, again, what you want to be doing as fast as possible, damage by overwhelm is increased by 20%, with a 100% chance to stun target for 5 seconds. You have 3 targets that you can stun. Now, again, it is from the bottom, so you can't really pinpoint it as well as you want. So if you want to hit, like, if they have stacks, so if they're doing the X formation right, you might not be able to hit those top 2 guys. You might be able to if you, like, moved it over to the side, so you hit the front 3 or the back 3, but you would never be able to hit probably both of the top dragons at the same time. But still, 100% chance to stun target for 5 seconds. I mean, in PvP, 5 seconds can be huge, especially if you're hitting their healers and things like that. Their healers and their DPS, if you can continuously stun them, and the cooldown is 20 seconds on this thing, so I mean, that's a quarter of the fight that they're just not able to do anything. So I think this is a great package for a dragon. So zombie to basically, you can just take out your tank, so you don't even have to run a tank. You can literally run a full team of DPS or 3 DPS and a support. So that'd be your support, and then your healer if you run a healer. So that's 5 dragons without a tank, and I think that's a great trade-off. So you have a kind of a impervious tank that just does crazy damage. So yeah, proportional to your crit damage there. So we'll go take a look at kind of a rune combination you can do for this guy, and also so this baby dragon looks kind of like an owl. I saw the picture and I was like, oh, what is this guy? And I just never did anything with him for probably about 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't realize who it was at the time. And then I just bumped him up here into the junior dragon state. And I was like, oh, this guy's kind of cool. And then I started leveling him up, and I turned him into the adult dragon once I hit him at 5 stars. And then I realized who he was. And I immediately just started spamming up his levels and throwing runes on him. And I was using him in PvP pretty early on, because as soon as he gets that passive, I mean, that's all you need is just to use him as a tank initially is pretty good. So just that 40 seconds of impervious where your opponent can't get their basic attacks through the front line is pretty awesome. But again, you got to use that formation I was telling you about, the T formation. So you got the back 3 guys and then the front 2 guys out front, with him in the very, very front, so he takes every single hit by himself. Alright. Oh, and before I go look at runes, I just want to touch on the other Wonder Dragon elements. So your Earth type here, his passive is become momentarily invulnerable when HP reaches 60 and 20%. And so it only happens once each per fight. So if you heal him back up and it comes back down, and you heal him back up and it comes back down, it won't just keep recurring. It only happens once. And you can level up the skill to take it from 50%, and you add another 50% if you get all to the level 5 here. So it makes it a guarantee that he becomes invulnerable. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better. Invulnerable is nice, but it's not for as long of a period, and I think that's what kind of sets it a little lower than, you know, the water, which is a guaranteed 40 seconds up to a full minute once you get it up to level 5. So I think that's pretty huge. The fire one, he just kind of reduces all the damage, so he's almost like you want to run him a tank, but I just don't think the fire type's nearly as good. But the dark type is also the same as the water type, so you could use, if you got him, you could theoretically use him instead. And he gains, on his drag skill, he gains his boost from attack, so you would want to run attack runes on him instead of crit damage. And his other passive here, yeah, inflict damage to random enemies. This attack receives a 90% bonus from attack. So same thing, does the random damage to 3 targets every 2 seconds. Pretty great, and a 90% boost from attack. I mean, that's pretty massive. And then you can put another 50% skill damage increase on that. So that skill is doing crazy amounts of work, lots and lots of damage. But he doesn't have the utility like the others have. So he doesn't have the stun. So when your HP is below 10%, damage by overwhelm is increased by 20%. So that's the same as the water dragon, with a 100% chance to cause recovery rate decrease effect for 15 seconds. So the water type, he'll stun target for 5 seconds, guaranteed, 3 of them. And then this guy he lowers the recovery rate. While not bad, it's still good. I think I would rather have the stun over the recovery rate decrease. Even if it's only a stun for 5 seconds, and this is 15 seconds recovery rate decrease, it doesn't block. It's not a recovery rate block. So it just lowers the amount of healing that is done. And while it is for 15 seconds, so if you want to keep spamming this, you would almost essentially stop their healer from being able to do anything. But I think being able just to stun 3 targets would be better, especially if you can hit, if they're running a T formation as well, and you hit the entire back row of attackers. I mean, that's 5 seconds where you're basically not taking any damage. So, but the trade-off is this passive here. He does a lot more damage than the water one does, just in pure abilities. So that's the trade-off. You get more damage, but a little bit less utility. It's still a good amount of utility, but just a little bit less. So either option would be a good choice for you here. The dark or the water, I would say. So it's more up to personal preference. I can speak today. Alright, now let's go take a look at those runes here. Alright, so this is my Water Wonder Dragon that I've got currently still giving him runes and powering up. So right now I'm sitting on a 24% crit rate. We've got 2 sets of crit rate runes on him, and his crit damage is 122%. Now you also got to remember that I run the Light Darknix as my leader on pretty much all my teams, and he gives a 31% crit rate bonus, so that's going to bump him up to what is that? 55% crit rate. And then I also run the Tamer here, who increases critical rate as his passive, which I think I need to level him up. Yeah, just barely. So that's another 16% on top of that. So that puts us up to 71% crit rate, and I think that's pretty solid here. 71% crit rate, and then the rest all goes into that crit damage. So most of the time we'll be hitting with crits, not every time, but I think that's a pretty solid number here. So we're running two sets of crit damage, and then the 1 set of crit rate, like I was saying. Up front, of course, I run an attack percentage on the number 2 slot here, and crit damage on my middle slot, so plus 25%. I could run the crit rate right here, and that would give me a guaranteed 100% crit rate chance if I wanted to do that. So I could switch out and run this rune right here. But I feel like with his ability scaling off of crit damage, that's just a little bit more important in my personal opinion. So, and then of course on the back slot here, again, another attack percentage rune. So the only thing that you're really going to have to consider is your middle slot here. And also you could balance it out. So if you wanted to run 2 sets of crit rate runes and 1 set of crit damage runes, then you would definitely want to have this as a crit damage rune. So just so that way you can help balance it out a little bit more, because your set bonuses right here, so 20% crit damage. So I got plus 40% crit damage just for running these 2 sets, as opposed to only 12% crit rate bonus. So, but that's how I've got mine set up. I think he's probably one of the most high-performing dragons that I have on my my top tier team, especially as far as my DPS goes. Because I've got the Light Darknix as my leader / other attack, so, and running him as light, so that way he can hit most elements pretty easily, and he doesn't really suffer any weaknesses to any dragon. That's what I like about the Light and Darks, is they're not weak necessarily, but they're also strong against pretty much everything. They're weak to each other, but they're also strong against each other, so it kind of cancels out. And then they're not weak to any of the other elements. And because I've been running the Jet Dragon, but he's been kind of underperforming lately, mainly in PvP. But I'll get into that more in the PvP video. But yeah, so Wonder Dragon, Water, and Dark as well. They're pretty much on par with each other. Are a great addition. If you pull one, level it up immediately, and start doing a lot more PvP if you're not already. I think you'll really like what you just got, even though you feel like, oh, I pulled a 4-star, oh, whatever, skip to the next summon. No, trust me. You got a good pull. You got a good pull, okay? But that's it for this video. I really hope you liked it. I try to give you as much detail as possible and try to help you out as much as I can. If you like the video, make sure you like I said, like the video and subscribe, so that way you can see more future content like this that I can send your way. And with that, we'll see you in the next video.